tutorial, I'm going to show you some really cool things you can do with Python strings. So let's start by defining a variable, course, and we set that to Python for beginners. Now, to calculate the number of characters in this string, we can use a built-in function called len. So len, we give it this course variable, and then we can print the result. Let's run this program. So as you can see, we have 20 characters in this string. This is particularly useful when we receive input from the user. For example, you have noticed that when you fill out a form online, each input field quite often has a limit. For example, you might have 50 characters for your name. So using this len function, we can enforce a limit on the number of characters in an input field. If the user types in more characters than we allow them, we can display an error, okay? Now, this len function is another function built into Python. It's a general purpose function, so it's not limited to counting the number of characters in a string. In the future, when we look at lists, I'm going to show you that we can use this function to count the number of items in a list. So it's a general purpose function. Now, we also have functions specific to strings. For example, we have functions for converting all these characters to uppercase or lowercase. To access these functions, we use the dot operator. Let me show you. So first we type course, then dot. Look, these are all the functions that are specific to strings. Now, in more accurate terms, we refer to these functions as methods. This is a term in object-oriented programming that we'll look at in the future. But for now, what I want you to take away is that when a function belongs to something else or is specific to some kind of object, we refer to that function as a method. For example, here we have this function, upper, for converting the string into uppercase. Now, more accurately, because this function is specific to strings, we refer to this as a method. In contrast, len and print are general purpose functions. They don't belong to strings or numbers or other kinds of objects, okay? So this is the difference between functions and methods. Now, let's look at this upper method. So let's print the result and run our program. There you go. We get all these characters displayed in uppercase. Now, note that this method does not change or modify our original string. In fact, it creates a new string and returns it. So if we print our course variable right after we call the upper method, you can see that our course variable still has its original form. So let's run this program one more time. There you go. Look, this is our original course variable. It's not modified. Now, similar to the upper method, we have another method for converting a string into lowercase. So let me show you. Print course.lower. Now let's run the program. So on the second line, you can see all characters are in lowercase. Now, there are times that you want to find a character or a sequence of character in a string. In those situations, you can use the find method. So let me delete these few lines. We call course.find. Here we pass a character, let's say P, and this will return the index of the first occurrence of that character. Let me show you. So let's print the result. We get 0 because the index of the first capital P in our string is 0. As another example, if we pass a lowercase o here, let's see what we get. We get 4 because the index of this o here is 4. Now, note that the find method is case sensitive, so it's sensitive to lowercase and uppercase characters. As an example, if we pass an uppercase O here and run this program, we get -1 because we don't have an uppercase O anywhere in this string, okay? We can also pass a sequence of characters. For example, we can pass beginners with a capital B. Let's run this program. We get 11 because the word beginners starts at index 11. Now, we also have a method for replacing a character or a sequence of characters, and that is called replace. So let's change find to replace. Let's say we want to replace beginners with absolute beginners. So we add a comma to pass a second value to this function, or more accurately, this method. We add a string. Here I'm going to pass absolute beginners. Okay, now let's run this program. So we get Python for absolute beginners. Again, this method, like the find method, is case sensitive. So if we pass beginners all in lowercase, this method is not going to find this exact word in our string, so it's not going to replace it with absolute beginners. Let's take a look. So I'm going to run the program one more time. Look, we still get Python for beginners. We can also replace a single character. For example, we can replace capital P with, let's say, capital J. Now, when we run this program, we get Jython for beginners. So these are the find and replace methods. And one last thing I want to show you in this tutorial. There are times that you want to check the existence of a character or a sequence of characters in your string. In those situations, you use the in operator. So let's say we want to know if this string contains the word Python. We can write an expression like this. String Python space in space course. So we're checking to see if Python is in the course variable. Now, this is an expression that produces a Boolean value, like a true or false. So we refer to this expression as a Boolean expression. Now, if we print this on the terminal, we should get true. And by the way, let me delete the second line. We don't need it anymore. So run the program, we get true. But if I change this capital P to a lowercase p and run the program, we get false because we don't have this exact sequence of characters in our string. Now note that the difference between the in operator and the find method is that our find method returns the index of that character or sequence of characters. But the in operator produces a Boolean value. Do we have this or not? So that's the difference. Now let's quickly recap all the cool things you learned to do with strings in this tutorial. We can use the len function to count the number of characters in a string. This is a general purpose function built into Python. We also have specific functions for strings, which we refer to as methods. These include upper for converting a string into uppercase. We also have lower and title methods. You learned about the find method, which returns the index of a character or sequence of characters. We have the replace method for replacing characters and words in a string. And finally, you learned about the in operator. So some characters in a string.